If you travel a few miles south along the coast from the historic university town of St. Andrews, you'll come across a rather shallow cliff cave called the Black Cave. It may not look like much now, but in the year AD 877, Scottish King Constantine I, son of the famous Kenneth I, the man who united the Picts and Gaels, was slain here. Constantine's reign had been marked by conflicts with the pillaging Danes, and it was after a battle with them at the headland known as Fife Ness that Constantine fled to the Black Cave. Yet it offered little protection, and he was cut down here by the Danes, leaving his younger brother, the Wing-Footed, as king. Wingfoot took the throne during a period of great instability in Scotland. The Vikings were running rampant, and there was dissent and treachery brewing amongst his own subjects. After a reign of only a year, he was murdered near Stirling by his associates. It isn't known if the subject of today's video, Gregory, played a role in this killing, but I think it's certainly far from impossible. Wingfoot died leaving an heir, Constantine, yet for some reason this boy did not end up becoming king upon his father's death, only being crowned some 21 years later. Instead, a man by the name of Gregory ascended to the throne of Scotland, a man about whom we know practically nothing. The Irish Chronicles do not mention him, neither do any Saxon writings. The only somewhat contemporary accounts of his reign come from two sources, the older Scottish Chronicle and the Chronicle of Melrose. It isn't known if he had any familial relationship with the king or the ruling family, but it seems fair to say that he played a role in the downfall of Wingfoot, if only by virtue of asking Cicero's favourite question. If you want to find your culprit, ask who benefited. In Andrew of Wintoun's original chronicle, which was written around the year 1390, he states that Gregory was the son of one man called Dungal. Who this man was is unclear. Regardless, he seems to have gathered a great deal of power to himself by the time of Wingfoot's death, enough to take the throne in place of the dead man's son. When it comes to Gregory's reign, which lasted until 889, we know very little now. The passage of time has rendered his deeds forgotten. Yet this was not so during the Middle Ages. During those times, Gregory became one of the most famous Scottish kings, and was said to have been so mighty in war that he conquered the entirety of Ireland, as well as half of England, if Andrew of Wintoun is to be believed. The claim that he conquered half of England has a degree of truth to it. An ancient English chronicle from the time, the History of St. Cuthbert, notes that an invading Scottish army was present in northern England during the time of Gregory's reign. However, it then states that he was defeated by the Viking King of York, so saying that he conquered half of England seems like pure fantasy. At face value, the claim that he conquered the entirety of Ireland sounds like it should be written off as nonsense. As to the rest of his reign, we know little. What we do know, however, is that just as his reign seems to have begun with the violent death of Wingfoot, so too did it end in violence. While staying in the Pictish stronghold of Dundurn in Perthshire, he was attacked and murdered by none other than Wingfoot's nephew, a man called Donald, who would then rule as king for several years, during which time he battled the Danes, and earned the nickname of the Madman. He would later be succeeded by Wingfoot's son, who had been exiled like Daenerys Targaryen and returned and assumed the throne in place of his slain father. This son, Constantine II, would later win a decisive battle against the Danish raiders at none other than Dundurn, where his father's killer, Gregory, was slain. Except there's a problem with this story, a big problem, one that risks shattering it entirely. This problem has a name, a human name, a man's name. It's this unpronounceable name. The Gaelic version of the name Hector, and if certain chronicles are to be believed, it was this man who was the King of Scotland during the years that Gregory was supposed to have been king. This, my friends, is a problem. Two men cannot be the king of the same country, can they? Well, let's try to get to the bottom of this. To do so, we need some background here. During the Dark Ages, what is today's Scotland was split broadly into three regions: the Pictish Kingdom, which roughly corresponds to the modern north and east of the country, the Brittonic kingdoms of the south, and the newer kingdom of the Gaels, or Scots, who had come over from Ireland as conquerors and raiders and missionaries. King Kenneth I, who lived from 810 to 858, was originally a king of the Gaels. He was the man who supposedly united the Scots and Picts to form the Kingdom of Scotland during the mid-9th century. During the following decades, the Gaels and Picts were supposedly united, but chronicles such as the older Scottish Chronicle recorded independent kingdoms in Strathclyde, one of the British kingdoms. It is from Strathclyde, the Brittonic kingdom, that Hector is supposed to have come. His father is said to have been the Brittonic king of Strathclyde, and he is recorded as becoming king upon his father's death. So then, what business does the king of Strathclyde have when it comes to the inheritance of the Scottish throne? Well, the Old Scottish Chronicle states that Hector's unnamed mother was one of Kenneth I's daughters. This would make him a descendant of the famous Kenneth, and thus place him in line to inherit not just the throne of Strathclyde, but the Pictish and Gaelic throne as well. However, as we know, Gregory occupied the throne of Scotland at this time, so how could Hector have been the king? Well, there are three main theories. The first is that perhaps the two were enemies. Perhaps, after Wingfoot's murder, Hector saw an opportunity to move in and position himself as the new king of Scotland, with the powerful backing of his own Strathclyde forces. It is said that not only did they reign at the same time, but that they died at the same time. In the same place, Dundurn. What does this mean? That they duelled to the death like some heroic tale? Well, no, because we know that it was Donald, the nephew of King Wingfoot, who slew Gregory. And the tales go that Hector died as the stronghold fell, which means one thing, that he was fighting side by side with Gregory. This makes the theory that they were enemies less credible. The second theory is that Hector served as the usurper Gregory's puppet. In order to give him legitimacy after usurping the throne, this theory suggests that he used the king of Strathclyde as his puppet, perhaps making him the official king by virtue of his descent from Kenneth, whilst Gregory, who had an unknown parentage, wielded the true power behind the scenes. This theory sounds nice, and it certainly fits with Gregory's ruthless nature, yet there's a problem. Why would the king of the powerful kingdom of Strathclyde be willing to be the puppet of an upstart nobody in a different kingdom? This makes this theory unlikely, in my opinion. The third is that they were buddies. In fact, more than buddies. And no, I'm not saying they were gay. Rather, they could well have been related. This theory rests heavily upon the proposition that Gregory's mysterious father, Dungal, was really just a mistaken version of the Brittonic name Dyfnwal. Okay then, who is this Dyfnwal? Well, the theory goes, this Dyfnwal was the same one that was king of Strathclyde sometime during the early 9th century. This Dyfnwal had a son, who reigned as king of Strathclyde until the year 872, when he was murdered by none other than Constantine I, the Pictish king who died in the Black Cave. However, prior to catching a fatal case of knife in the back, he had a son, who, in turn, had a son of his own, none other than Hector. So, if the theory is true, and Gregory was Dyfnwal's second son, and the brother of the murdered king, it would make him Hector's grand uncle, thus giving them a reason to be friends. Secondly, it would give Gregory a clear motivation for killing Wingfoot, who was the son of the king who murdered Gregory's brother. So the theory goes, the two jointly ruled, and died side by side as their stronghold burned down around them. It's a tale of blood feud and power, and it's certainly interesting. However, I'm not entirely convinced. Firstly, Dungal and Dyfnwal are quite different names. Indeed, one is Gaelic, the other is British. Saying that Dungal is just a corrupted version of Dyfnwal seems like quite a big stretch to me. Secondly, several generations passed from the time of Dyfnwal and his sons to the time of Hector, meaning that Gregory likely would have had to have been an old and very resilient man indeed, to have outlived his father, brother and nephew. This seems greatly at odds with his recorded life, a life filled with war and violence. He overthrew a king, led conquering armies, and died by the sword. Seems a bit much for a geriatric. To conclude, it seems that the exact relationship between the two men will never be conclusively known, and there ends the mystery of England's forgotten invader. Except there's something we forgot. The Chronicle states that he didn't just conquer half of England, but Ireland as well. We've explained the England part through suggesting it was Gregory who led a raid against the Vikings of York, but how could he have conquered Ireland? Well, this is just my theory, but perhaps it refers to Gregory, as the King of the Picts, waging a successful war against the Gaels of western Scotland, who originally came from Ireland. Over the years, this could have turned into the story that he conquered Ireland, and it lends maybe some support to the idea that Gregory and Hector were enemies, as Hector's kingdom was located in roughly the same area as the kingdom of the Gaels.